In the city, Peter goes through his everyday schedule with his better half Alice and their 2 little girls. 1. At night, he's peering through the window when a brilliant light shows up overhead. Unexpectedly consuming articles start falling and killing everyone in the city as they attempt to take off. While the structure gets hit too, Peter awakens and acknowledges it was a bad dream. This has been happening for weeks, and Alice requests that he see a specialist in light of the fact that the family is stressed, yet he says he can figure it out himself. Alice is baffled and brings up he awakens all her times he has a bad dream, so he isn't the only one managing absence of rest. The following morning, Peter guarantees his girl Lucy to get off of work early so they can go to the dock. He likewise consents to set up a party tomorrow to observe Alice's advancement, which astounds her in light of the fact that recently they almost never see their companions. Then, at that point, Peter gets in the lift to go to work and his little girl Hannah is going about as the administrator for entertainment only. Their neighbor Beam likewise goes along with them, so Peter needs to hang tight for him to leave to apologize to his little girl for being missing recently. While heading to work, Peter sees an unusually formed building and he couldn't say whether it's genuine or he's seeing things. At the processing plant, he's in the center of dealing with some gear when one of his hands begins shaking. Abruptly he sees blood on it and gets a dream wherein he's pounding somebody on the floor. He wakes up when he hears the gear coming up short, brought about by his interruption. His supervisor David sees this and suggests him a decent center, however Peter demands he's fine. Anyway, he takes the risk to inquire as to whether he can leave early. David concurs in return for Peter promising he'll go to the center. In the interim, Alice is doing extraordinary at work and her manager needs to bring her into another task, yet she turns it down so she can leave early and accompany her loved ones. In the wake of getting the center's telephone number from David, Peter begins preparing to leave. He sees a light glinting on the work area and out of nowhere more dreams assume control over his brain. He sees himself fixing a light while hearing an individual on television discussing allowing a specific gathering an opportunity to help the planet. Anyway, someone else says they have no freedoms and that they'll ascend against mankind. The vision shows individuals on a descent in the roads with signs that says Earth is for people. Then, at that point, consuming articles show up on the sky and starts killing individuals. Peter falls while the structure is hit, yet he actually takes off in light of the fact that he sees trespassers in the passage taking shots at individuals. At the point when Peter finds Alice stowing away, he awakens and finds himself on the ground of the plant. To Peter's shock, he must have oblivious for some time on the grounds that he's late for his family meeting. As he runs out, he sees a light showing up on the sky and inquires others about it, yet no other individual sees it. At that point he sees a telescope on a store show. Also, chooses to get it. At home, Alice attempts to concoct a rationalization for Peter, however the young ladies don't get it, they're actually frustrated. At the point when Peter at long last shows up, he attempts to apologize, but Alice is enraged and continues to chide him. Peter must choose the option to concede he dropped working. Anyway, Lucy is awakened by their battle and Alice needs to go deal with her. That evening, Peter longs for the attack once more, and this time he sees Lucy crying close to her dead guardians, beseeching them to awaken. Unexpectedly, Hannah emerges with a weapon, just for Peter to awaken and gaze at the center's number. The following day, Peter attempts to converse with his little girls, however Hannah leaves the room. Lucy is furious as well, however basically Peter will apologize to her and fixes her messed up talking monkey. Prior to leaving for work, Peter tells Alice he's known as the specialist for an arrangement, which gives her expectation. Later at the center, Peter meets an individual patient, who uncovers that he's having similar dreams. They fellow accept something significant is coming and that individuals in the center delete their considerations to prevent society from going into turmoil. Then the man leaves for his arrangement. Also, Peter begins having dreams once more. He sees the city obliterated and a gathering of equipped survivors. Being directed by David, who offers the industrial facility as a base. Beginning to figure out the other patient. Peter chooses to leave the center without seeing the specialist. At the point when he returns home, he tells Alice that he thinks his dreams are cautioning them about an approaching debacle and he avoided the specialist, leaving Alice exceptionally frustrated. That evening it's Alice's party, yet rather than blending, Peter decides to be in the gallery with his telescope, anticipating something terrible. At the point when the party is reaching a conclusion, Beam comes to tell Peter he ought to focus on his loved ones. Out of nowhere they hear a few roaring commotions and the bay windows up with falling sparkling items. To Peter's shock, Beam can see it as well. As Alice and Beam's significant other go along with them, a robot flies by and collides with a structure, causing a gigantic blast that sends shockwaves through the city, destroying it. Peter's gatherings are tossed against the window and terrains inside the condo. They rapidly recuperate. Furthermore, investigate and learn they're enduring an onslaught very much like in Peter's dreams. Frightened, they run back inside and begin searching for their children. Lucy is concealing under the table, however Hannah left with Beam's little girl to play at their place. Peter surges out of the condo to see as her and is encircled by loads of individuals going around in alarm as they continue to hear blasts outside. At the point when Peter enters Beam's condo, he's stunned to see an odd airplane at the window that triggers his recollections, so he freezes. The airplane is going to start shooting, yet fortunately Beam hauls Peter away. Without a moment to spare, they rush to conceal in another room, and after the airplane departs, Beam says he didn't find the young ladies in his place. Next the men rush to the lift and work together to open it forcibly, just to track down a body inside. At the point when they open the other one, they see it in the floor underneath, so they cautiously slide on it and open the seal to find their girls at last. As the folks help the young ladies emerge, power goes out in the structure. In the loft, Alice and Lucy stick to one another, concealing under the table while the airplane flies by with its looking through light. Fortunately the couple isn't found. On the steps, Peter stops to look behind the entryway and finds an officer trespasser is currently in the passages. They quickly rush higher up and every family gets back to their own loft. Peter lets Alice know that this mayhem matches his dreams and he recalls David's words, saying they ought to conceal in the manufacturing plant. Anyway, they can in any case hear individuals being shot in the passages. So for the present they move a furniture to blockade the entryway and make the young ladies conceal in the storeroom. Unexpectedly somebody begins beating on the entryway, so Peter and Alice utilize their entire existence to keep it shut. Simultaneously Lucy acknowledges she lost her monkey and goes searching for it under the table. At that point the trooper in the hall fires at the entryway, yet all the same fortunately the several ducks without a moment to spare. Then the warrior begins making openings in the wall, so 2 or 3 hurries to the room to stow away and finds Lucy is absent. At the point when the officer comes in, he hears Lucy's toy and draws nearer, just to gaze at her as though he was stunned by what he sees. He attempts to contact her. In any case, Peter shows up and starts him off. Then they begin battling, and after loads of battle Peter takes the officer's weapon, yet he can't utilize it. As the battle proceeds, Alice shows up at the entryway and calls for Lucy to return her to the room. The trooper overwhelms Peter and attempts to wound him, yet before the blade can contact him, Alice stirs things up around town to make him fall. Then, at that point, she fires, thumping him and takes him out, possibly halting when Lucy calls out for her. A while later, the family leaves with the warrior's weapons and sneaks around the hallways while evading lots of bodies. They use the stairwell as they keep on hearing shouting and blasts, so Peter goes to the rooftop first for well-being. Out of nowhere he's gone after by somebody, however he evades without a moment to spare and takes note. It's Beam. The two families rejoin and they gaze at the city, which is torching while the airplane search the region with their lights. An airplane unexpectedly obliterates the adjoining building and Peter's gathering promptly stows away to try not to be seen. The airplane departs in the wake of tracking down no one and the gathering concurs they can't remain there, so they move into the glass cleaner's lift. They scarcely go down a couple of floors before one of the backings breaks, constraining them to enter a condo through a window. The lift falls just after the last individual ascensions out of it. In the meantime, the trooper awakens and initiates the tracker on his firearm to search for the survivors. At the new loft, Peter looks at the firearm and finds it has a biometric trigger which must be shot by its proprietor. The gathering examines what to do and Peter indeed raises the plant, saying it was worked as a fort. There are officers still in the city, however, so Alice fills them in about a passage a couple of blocks from that point that could take them straightforwardly to the processing plant. At that point the intruders take shots at the loft and everybody is wrecked by the blast. Alice runs to safeguard her young ladies, yet Beam's girl hurries to search for her father, who is as of now dead. Her mom gets her before she can fall into a pit on the ground and the airplane shows up once more, opening fire. Peter hauls his family out of the loft while hearing how Beam's better half and girl get killed. In the lobby, Peter's family sees two additional troopers and take cover behind a wall. Peter snatches wires from the floor and uses it to screw with the weapon, bypassing its biometric validation. At the point when the officers draw nearer, Peter figures out how to shoot them down one after another rapidly. Then, at that point, the family leaves the structure, finding the roads loaded with garbage and flares. They can see more officers carry out individuals to kill them and they race to stow away as the slaughter proceeds. At that point, a lot of equipped local people open discharge on the troopers, beginning a gunfight that rapidly closes when an airplane kills them all from a higher place. In the high rise, the warrior from previously tracks down his colleagues dead. He quickly leaves and continues to follow the tracker on his firearm. Back to the family, they go through dull regions until they come to the passage. Peter goes first to open it, then, at that point, Alice sends Hannah, who goes down rapidly. Next is Lucy, who freezes when she sees an airplane drawing closer. Alice hops in to get her and starts running toward the passage as the airplane starts shooting. The family gets inside with perfect timing for the blast to stir things up around town and more garbage falls. The crisis lights are as yet working and Alice finds she has an extreme injury on her midsection. Peter helps her walk, yet after certain snapshots of meandering through the passages, Alice is excessively feeble to continue onward and Peter puts her down so she can rest. At that point, the warrior from before appears and Lucy cautions Peter in the nick of time so he can safeguard himself from the assault. Another battle begins and in the battle Peter breaks a line, filling the passage with smoke. Peter continues to fire despite the fact that he can't see the trooper, who unexpectedly leaps out of the smoke to assault once more. As the officer attempts to take his firearm back, Peter gets a block and starts beating the person up with it until he breaks the protective cap. At that point, Peter requests to realize the reason why they're going after So the fighter removes his protective cap and everybody is stunned to see a youthful human named Miles, who won't address any inquiries. Abruptly the young lady's cry since Alice has dropped, so Peter holds Miles at gunpoint and makes him convey his significant other. At last they come to the plant and Peter utilizes the secret key on the lock, however it won't open. Peter begins beating on the entryway until it at last goes up and David shows up with a lot of gatekeepers. They promptly put Alice on a cot. Furthermore, the warrior gets captured. When inside, the specialist continues to shock Alice to get a conclusion, making her entire body over and over shake. Peter goes crazy yet everybody holds him down, saying it's an ordinary conclusion technique. Whenever Peter calls attention to it, seems like David had been prepared for. David makes sense that the intrusion has been normal for a long time. As the rooftop shakes under the assault from the intruders, David arranges his men to kill Miles. The specialist says there's nothing he can accomplish for Alice, so Miles unexpectedly yells that he can help. At first Peter thinks the person is deceiving to be saved, however he sees his withering spouse and is sufficiently frantic to allow him to attempt. The haven continues to shake and David reports a departure, referencing he has transport in a lower burrow. Peter advises his girls to leave with David while he helps their mother. A while later, Peter and Miles bring Alice into one more space and Miles begins cutting Alice with no graciousness, which drives Peter mad once more. Miles opens up Alice's skin and uncovers a lot of mechanical leaves behind the projectile caught in them. Peter goes nuts and Miles acknowledges he doesn't have any idea what they really are. He makes sense of Alice needs a substitute wellspring of force and Peter can give it, so he gives him guidelines on the best way to get to himself. Peter utilizes a blade and is stunned not to feel any torment by any means as his skin opens up, uncovering he likewise has mechanical parts and fake organs. Miles cautions him that in the event that this doesn't work they'll both kick the bucket, yet Peter tells him to at any rate, do it. As Miles interfaces Peter to Alice, Peter drops and sees the dreams once more. It turns out they don't anticipate the future, they're really recollections from an earlier time. Peter and Alice are simulated intelligence robots known as artificial materials, who used to fill in as janitors and weren't dealt with well by their supervisors. The people made all engineered materials to serve them, yet their numbers were rising and individuals begun to contend in the event that engineered materials merited freedoms as well. Fights assumed control over the roads, asserting that artificial materials were taking their positions and Earth was for people. Ultimately humankind became weary of fabricated materials and began a conflict against them, starting to shoot at a typical evening to kill them all. Peter stowed away with Alice and when a human nearly found them, Peter immediately took him out. Then, at that point, he took his weapon and shot at additional approaching human officers. The primary human awakened and attempted to catch Alice. So Peter fired, whipping him until he was genuinely dead. At that point more artificial materials appeared and Peter gave them the weapons from the officers so they could protect themselves. Since fabricated materials were progressed and difficult to kill, the people needed to surrender and passed on Earth to begin another general public on Mars. In the city, a gathering of engineered materials watched the roads to really look at the harm, uncovering that Peter's colleagues and neighbors were all additionally fake. David was certain people would return for more and began setting up the production line as a base for what's to come. Close by, Alice tracked down Lucy and Hannah weeping for their dead guardians. The young ladies were the two engineered materials who had been embraced by people. Hannah pointed a firearm at them, however the couple made sense of they were fabricated materials as well and Peter embraced her. That day they took on the young ladies. A short time later the fabricated materials began modifying the city and carried on with an ordinary existence with the privileges they generally cared about. A few fabricated materials needed to disregard the conflict and the culpability of killing, so they cleaned their recollections to fail to remember everything, counting their own tendency. David and his group kept it so they could safeguard everybody in the future. Once in a while engineered materials would get looks at their recollections back, so they would be shipped off the center to delete them once more. In the present, Peter awakens and sees the association. Finding Alice has made do. He asks why Miles is helping them, so the person makes sense of the war happened to his granddad's age quite a while back. On Mars he had been imagined that fabricated materials are horrendous animals that adoration to kill. However, when he arrived on Earth he was stunned to see ordinary families simply attempting to carry on with their lives. At that point Alice awakens and, on account of the association, she got her recollections back too. In the meantime every one of the survivors are going through the other passage and finding a train sitting tight for them. Anyway, Lucy will not leave without her folks, and Hannah sits with her to pause. At the principal entrance, the rooftop breaks and the people open fire on the engineered monitors, who make an honest effort to safeguard the production line while winding up dead individually. Back to Miles, he quits for the several injuries and lets them go, declining to battle. Peter and Alice cautiously move around the manufacturing plant, seeking shelter any place they can, as they watch the people and the artificial materials kill each other in an unending path of savagery. Alice finds a weapon and starts shooting as well, giving cover to Peter, who hurries to get Lucy's monkey and stows away to start shooting also. First floor, David brings the last survivors and shuts the entryway, making the sisters fight. Feeling terrible, David opens it once more. The sisters would rather not get in the train, so David and his men need to take them forcibly. When they have an opening, Peter and Alice go down the passage and the fighters follow them. 2 or 3 locks the entryway behind them and starts running, seeing the train is leaving without them. Fortunately, the driver hears their shouting and stops the vehicle, permitting the sisters to rejoin with their folks. At that point the warriors explode the entryway, so David starts shooting, purchasing enough time for himself and the family to get on the train. The vehicle takes off and the nearby engineered materials at last get away. A weapon toward the finish of the train makes a point to continue to shoot, to prevent the troopers from following them, and an entryway closes after they pass through. In a little while, the train gets a scaffold over the ocean, and that extension is obliterated after they pass through, so it's not possible for anyone to know where the engineered materials will be beginning another life.